So war is never pleasant, but World War I was extremely bloody, with more death and destruction than ever before. Today we're going to talk about the battle strategies, warfare, and tactics in World War One. Now, prior to World War One, battles were fought with sabers and cannons and guns that shot only a few bullets before reloading was necessary. During World War One, the invention of new strategies and weapons caused mass destruction. Most new techniques were unsuccessful, which also cost lives. Over 70 million men fought in World War I. About 15 million military and civilian people died. The United States lost about 100,000 people. British, Russia, Germany, and Austria-Hungary, the other big players in the war, suffered collective losses in the millions. France lost a generation of young men. France also suffered enormous property damage, as most of the war on the Western Front was fought on French soil. So during World War I, a water-cooled machine gun was invented. Now this was used as well as air-cooled machine guns. These guns could fire hundreds of bullets in rapid stream before reloading. It's a big difference than just a few bullets before reloading. The water-cooled machine gun did not need time to cool down and could be used continuously. The use of both guns allowed attacks and casualties to be bigger and more devastating than ever before. The machine gun is still an important weapon in use by the military today. Now, when World War I broke out in August of 1914, the history of aircraft was only about 10 years old. The first warplanes used in the war were for spotting the location of enemy soldiers and guns. These were called reconnaissance craft. Sometimes you'll hear people say recon, and they mean reconnaissance craft. They were extremely useful in trench warfare, looking down on the enemy lines or helping direct artillery fire to more specific positions. Fighter aircraft developed later to shoot down enemy reconnaissance craft. Specialized fighter planes, such as the British Sopwith Camel and the German Fokkers, were produced. Sturdier craft capable of carrying bombs to drop on enemy targets were also built. Pilots fought with one another in what they call dogfights. Those that shot down a certain number of enemy craft were given ace status. Now, the most popular ace in World War I was someone known as the Red Baron. Now, whenever you watch Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin, there's actually a segment in there about the Red Baron. The kids are talking with each other as they're walking in their costumes, and they're like, I wonder if they've ever caught that Red Baron. Now, and then it shoots to Snoopy, who pretends to be a fighter pilot going after the Red Baron. So he gets on top of his little doghouse, and he acts like he's flying his doghouse. That has to do with somebody we call the Red Baron. Now, what's his real name? His name is Manfred von Richthofen. So he earned the nickname the Red Baron during World War I because he flew a red plane and was the top-rated fighter pilot during the war. The Red Baron was actually the nickname that the British called him. He had other nicknames, including Little Red in France and Red Battle Flyer in Germany. Now, he is German. He was born in Germany, and his dad was a general in the army, so he knew he was going to be a part of the military. He went to military school at age 11. Whenever war broke out in 1914, he was 22 years old. Now, he was serving in the cavalry, which means that he was with the horses. His first job during the war was running reconnaissance patrols on the Western Front. However, soon the fighting on the Western Front deteriorated into trench warfare. We talked about trench warfare last time. Very dangerous, especially for horses. Lots of barbed wire, lots of open space. It's just not good for horses. So there was little use for the cavalry, and soon he was just delivering messages beyond enemy lines. Now we know that he flew, so how did he get into that? Well, he was eager to be more involved in the war, so he volunteered to work as an observer on airplane recon missions. He flew along with pilots, spotting enemy troops, reading maps, and using his machine gun to shoot at enemy planes. He met with a famous fighter pilot named Oswald Boelke on a train, and then he decided to become a fighter pilot. He trained hard. He took his first solo flight on 1915. And Boelke taught Manfred everything he needed to know about becoming a fighter pilot. He won his first official victory on September 7th, 1916. Now, a victory is when a pilot shoots down an enemy plane. The victory has to be confirmed by witnesses so that other people don't claim they have victories when they really don't. Manfred soon became one of the most decorated fighter pilots in Germany. He wasn't necessarily a great pilot, but he was a very accurate shooter. He took few risks and used excellent tactics. He often used the sun to hide from view while attacking an enemy from above. He also made use of other pilots and planes to protect him from being attacked from behind or from the side when he went on an attack. Now, he had a red plane, and that's how people knew him. So in January of 1917, Manfred began to paint his plane red. Soon his squadron was painting part of their planes red as well, and he became the commander of the Flying Circus, which was a group of the top fighter pilots in Germany. They moved around the Western Front and fought in key battles. Manfred became the top fighter pilot in World War I with 80 confirmed kills. And he was shot down once in July of 1917, but he survived and returned to battle later that year. Actually, in World War I, to be shot down was still had a good chance of surviving that. You see, fighter pilots were not always trying to kill the pilot, they were just trying to shoot them down so that they couldn't cause any more harm. But then some of the pilots did survive those. So the Red Baron became very famous on both sides of the war and was one of the top war heroes in Germany. The British called him the Red Baron, and he's still most widely known by this name. The Allies were trying to shoot this guy down because they thought that it would break the morale of the German people if they could. There's another little factoid here that historians estimate that if the unconfirmed victories were also included, he shot down over 100 enemy planes during the war. So he was a big deal. If you've ever heard of a Zeppelin, or if you've ever seen pictures of a giant air balloon floating above, dropping bombs, well, those are in World War I. So I learned a little bit about them. In the spring of 1915, the first German airships appeared in Britain's night sky. Airships were huge, powered balloons filled with gas that was lighter than air. So this meant they could float in the air. The first airship was designed by the German Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin in 1900, just 15 years earlier. This led to airships being given the name Zeppelins. Airships could carry much bigger bombs than that of airplanes flown in World War I, and this made them useful for bombing raids. Now, interesting enough, crews in the first airships had to drop their bombs over the side of the gondola, which is a passenger car, by hand. They would actually have to grab the bombs and drop them. But later models had automatic release mechanisms to make things easier. So London and Paris were among the cities first bombed by German airships in World War I. Check my time. Let's go back and learn a little bit about war at sea. The launch of Britain's Dreadnought battleship in 1906 outperformed every battleship of the day. This led to Britain, Germany, and other countries engaging in a massive naval or military ship building program. However, when World War I was fought mainly on land, and both sides avoided naval conflict. The only major sea battle was the Battle of Jutland, which happened off the coast of Denmark in the North Sea in 1916. It did not achieve anything, and the main fighting took place under the sea, as German U-boats, which were submarines, waged a war against enemy trade ships. This was to destroy any supplies on their way to Britain, in an attempt to force Britain out of the war. That's a tactic that's used a lot in war, is that we're going to attack the supply ships or the supply routes, because if you can keep your enemy from getting the supplies they need, whether it be food or fuel or anything like that, that's a good chance that you have an upper hand. Let's talk a little bit about U-boats. We'd mentioned the German ships. In 1914, the German U-boat, which is an actual U, is a submarine. The U-boat fleet numbered only about 24, but they were proving capable of attacks on merchant ships in the North Sea. In February 1915, Germany launched a campaign of submarine attacks against Allied, which are Britain, France, and Russia, merchant ships off the British coastline. U-boats operated both under the sea and on the surface. They were usually armed with 1 or 2 deck guns for use on the surface, such as the model of, anyways, I don't know the name of it, but it's a model here on the page. These guns were very effective with high rates of fire. German U-boats sank 5,554 Allied and neutral merchant ships, as well as many warships. However, they also suffered considerable losses on their own. Out of a total fleet of 372 German U-boats, 178 were destroyed by Allied bombs or torpedoes. Now, there were also something called contact mines used in the sea. Contact mines were attached to the bottom of the sea by a chain, and they exploded when a ship touched one of their spikes. So it's like a giant ball that just sits there, and when a ship touched it, it exploded, almost like German mines. But they sank more British warships than any other weapon. Sorry. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about some tactics used on the Western Front. Remember, we mentioned the Western Front. One of those tactics was gas warfare. Now, that was something here that played a very big role. The first time that poison gas had been used effectively in war was on April 22nd, 1915, at the Battle of Ypres. The Germans used chlorine gas on the French Algerian troops, killing large numbers of soldiers and causing the rest to rush into a panicked retreat, as they had no protection against the choking effects. Over the next 3 years, both sides made extensive use of gas. The Germans released about 75,000 tons, while the British and French released 56,000 tons. The first gas clouds were released from containers and blown by the wind towards the enemy. This caused a problem, however, if the wind changed and blew the gas in the wrong direction. This led to the development of gas-filled shells, which were fired from guns in enemy territory. So they fired these guns full of these shells. They almost like large bullets almost, and they fired them out. And these shells contain a liquid that turned into gas when the shell burst. Different markings indicated type of chemicals inside. For the Germans, green indicated chlorine, which caused severe breathing difficulties, while blue indicated something I cannot pronounce, which caused vomiting. So either people are going to be having severe breathing problems or they're going to be vomiting through this. Others, though, caused temporary blindness and blistering and burning of the skin. So another tactic, the last tactic I want to talk about is tanks, okay? After the outbreak of war, some officers had already started thinking about how to make a strong protective vehicle that could work on all types of land. The lack of movement on the Western Front increased the need to find a machine that could cut through the barbed wire and possibly cross enemy trenches. So remember, in the no man's land on the enemy trenches, there's a bunch of barbed wire, so there's not a whole lot of movement going on, but a tank could certainly get through that barbed wire with no problem at all. By 1916, both the British and French had made an example of a strong bulletproof vehicle. British tanks were the first to arrive on the battlefields of World War I in September of 1916, but they were not very reliable. It was only in November of 1917, at the Battle of Cambrai, that tanks were used effectively for the first time. Fleets of tanks flattened barbed wire, crossed enemy trenches, and acted as shields for the advancing soldiers. Tanks played an important role in the Allied attacks through 1918. What these tanks had was they had guns on each side, and then they also had guns on the back. So not only was that giant shield protection type deal that could go over anything, but it also had guns on all sides of it. So it was a pretty formidable weapon used in World War I. So that's all we have for today. We will cover more in World War I tomorrow, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.